hypothesis about the kids learning.
Uh-huh.
So what could she do to give them strategies to persevere in that case? What would you do now that you kind of know what got them stop persevering? What could you do?
Well, I think the next step would be to give them lots of situations where the scale's not one, and have them look at maybe more real world problems where your graphs are going to be in the thousands, or they're going to be, bigger than they are. Also, maybe when I teach it in the future, remembering this and coming, always starting with not using one as a scale. Like maybe have one be the third day we talk about slope, we bring it back to one, but always start them off with 2s or 6s or however works with the problems.
And if they had a chance to use scale going different situations, so that one it was already graphed for them.
Right, and we did do some story problems with rate of change, but not a lot of them we asked them to go to graphing, but it was kind of like the fourth step. So they had to solve it algebraically, then make a table, and then graph it. So I don't think a lot of people had to get to the graphing part of it. And that may just be an oversight on the teaching, the flow that we went. So maybe focusing more on having them graph.
Okay. And then with their strategies with the y-intercept, and that was their other piece you said. So what would you do with that to help them solidify?
I think that we need to have a conversation about what is an intercept and why do we care about intercepts. Because I think a lot of them, this is in the past, I haven't seen it this year, but they see y equals 2x plus 4, and they put the 4 on the x-axis instead of the y-axis. I don't know why they do that, but I think that there needs to be more work about intercepts means one of them is 0, and you're looking for the other one, and do more work around what an intercept is. Should help clear up some of that confusion.
So when you see them put the numbers on the wrong axis, what do you do to help them with that? What strategies?
I usually go back and review, we're looking at y-intercept, but I think now I'm thinking more about it, maybe I need to be clear about what the y-intercept means and having that discussion about intercepts. So in the past, I've just corrected it and said, no, we always start on the y, but I don't think I've actually answered for them, why do we start on the y? Why is the y so important to us?
She's got enough.
Right there.
Way more. She's got enough things for her head to think about what I want to do next. She's got a real strong strategy about kind of dealing with scale, thinking both in what she will do next time that she introduces this, plus what she can do right now to give them some more tools, some reference points to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And plus her thinking, she's going to think about why kids don't put it on the Y, and maybe even explore with kids why that is.
Right.
So she's got all she can, in this moment, kind of work for the next step. When you've got her to the next pieces, that she's feeling really good about kids beginning to more and more persevere, and then strategies when kids get stuck, what her next step is. So.
Done.
Nice job.
Can I ask a question?
Nice job to you.
No.
At one point, I'm going to that. At one point, she had talked about Raylene did much more than I thought she would, and I was surprised by that. Would it be just as valuable, because you tended to go towards what didn't work, would it be as valuable to go with, so what do you think caused Raylene to do that today? Could you have gone that route too?
You can go either route. You can go either route to what those pieces that are. There are multiple entry points into the next journey with her. Always the thing that I'm thinking about is her problem of practice. How do I get her to discuss her problem of practice and something that she might come to a solution? So at some point in time,
Right, I have to go.
she always thinks that they did right. She already knows they did right, and that's good. There was a question right in the beginning that she talked about, that she was a little bit surprised about some of those things. What made you surprised? Why did you think so? But at some point you got to get to the place where what sticks the kids, because that is, but there's probably 5 or 6 entry points. I just picked the one that I picked. It doesn't have to be that one. I think she'll get to the same spot, because she'll always get to what the kids didn't do. She'll always get to scale and slope was a problem. That's where she saw them getting stuck. And the interesting piece is I didn't even notice any of that. Not me. It wasn't in what I saw, because that's why our data is so less relevant, because but I saw she saw it get stuck. So you could have asked that question, there was a lot of places you could have gone and asked, but that's one I picked, so.
Right. I was just curious about taking it through the positive, through what she said. I was surprised by Raylene's, because she's not normally that way. What do you think caused that to happen? And when she's not that way, what's it look like?
Right.
Because that was still getting to the heart of the perseverance. So I was just curious.
Either
because I was
way,
listening for big words, and that was one of them.
either way,
Big words.
you were looking for those kind of the teacher's own evaluative words. Yes, that could have totally been fine too. Like I said, it's not like that's it. It's both positive and negative evaluative statements that you want to hook on.
Yeah. Did we want to
Thank
make
you.
a
How's it going?
It's going good. I'm okay. I didn't really sleep last night, so maybe part of that.
Well, I think it might be good. It might be good about how Eric felt about it too. And I think
Yeah, no,
about
I know, yeah,
I felt-
yeah.
I'm all done. Julie and I can chat, catch
We
up.
were going
Can we do Erica
to,
and
we
Julie?
do, we do get to
No, I
get to
know,
chat.
I know.
But we do want to thank you
Thank
for
you.
opening up your classroom and for sharing your students and sharing your practice with us.
Yeah.
It is so appreciated, and I just want to express that from the group. But because Heidi's been in that hot seat, and she has shared afterwards kind of what that feels like, I think we would appreciate for you, if you could reflect back a little bit to us.
Okay. Like from the beginning of it, or just this portion of it?
Whatever is in your mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, I think overall it's been a really positive experience I think a lot of planning went into this lesson to kind of showcase for you what I thought would give you a good look at our strategies in persevering. I also really like this type of lesson because it does give me that flexibility to meet individually with students, because they are doing a finite set of problems that I can easily know where are they going to get stuck. So that's why I kind of like to use it as review. But as for the debriefing portion of it, I think I appreciated having time between the lesson and coming to see you to kind of debrief myself, so that I could, I looked through their journals and I could kind of write down some thoughts about what I saw so that I could bring that with me. I think it would have been a completely different experience if Julie and I had sat down as soon as the lesson was over and talked about it, because sometimes you feel at the very end of it, you're still processing what went right, what went wrong, what do I need to do tomorrow? And instead I had that hour to think about, where am I going to go from here? What did I learn today? And that's something that Heidi and I have been trying to do as we do this process, is we have an hour afterwards together that we can kind of talk through the day and get ready. As for Julie's questioning, I felt like it was very positive, and she really made me think about what did happen in the class. I think it helps that we've worked together before, so we have that relationship of communication. But I think overall it was a very positive experience.
We asked Julie what she felt like for her, as long
Yes,
as we're learning.
so we appreciate you stepping in.
It's my pleasure.
Notice.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
It is interesting being here and thinking about what we talked about beforehand, because I was thinking I would need a series of questions, and what is it that we saw and how was I going to use that, and just to really get in the conversation, which I'm more comfortable with anyways, and just saying how to go, and then have that natural conversation. But while having the conversation, thinking in my head about what she's saying and how, the questions of what judgments she's making about her class, I thought that it stuck with me that's where I need to focus. And since she's making those judgments, that's where the problem is, and that's where we need to go. So just our little mini conversation before helped me a lot. And then, of course, Ted stepping in because this is a different conversation. So, but it's good being on the hot seat because I think I learned a lot more here. So.
So, we've handed out a reflection sheet, and so we'd just like for you to take a couple minutes and, at this moment in time, what is one insight, aha, or discovery change in your thinking that has happened as a result of this process to this point today? So thinking about this experience to this point, what's a learning, an aha, a reflection?
Do you want a reflection sheet?
Oh, sure. I didn't, it's okay.
check-in, are people going through and also doing next steps? Are you, so have you already done that? It's also, yeah, so you're responding to all those? Okay, well then I'll go ahead and give you a couple more minutes so that everybody can be at the same place.
2009 is the next year.
They're getting some education. They're fun and they love it. Maggie said Elaine. Sophia goes to a preschool up here. but
Sounds
they're-
like people are getting to a place where they're ready to share.
So,
We're gonna do partnership first. So you don't want that whole lot.
They don't say all their stuff.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so, let's go ahead and let's do a partner share, and I'm gonna, like, maybe, would you mind, we were doing that narrative, and
No
then,
problem.
so that way we go that way, and you two share. And then Anita and I'm just sharing what you learned. So we're just going to do a partner share. Now, don't discuss next steps and what that's going to be, but just what the learning is.
Hey, Matt, by the way.
Nice to meet you.
Let's share some deep, intimate thoughts with each
Okay,
other.
sounds good. And then we'll not know each other.
So.
What'd you learn?
I learned that kind of what I see really just helps me get a frame of reference for what's going on. Really, the conversation that in my role takes place with the teacher is really up to the teacher kind of leading it, and just trying to help them identify, problem, what they think the cause is, and ways to solve it on their own. Because ultimately, you as the teacher, you're the one who's doing it every day. You're the one that's got to figure it out. You're the one that's got to apply it. It's got to mean something to you. Maybe I can provide bits and tidbits of advice, but ultimately it's really not going to be as effective as you kind of figuring it out on your own. So to me, that's
I knew I wanted to go there.
something I'm kind of really realizing, and I think as a teacher, I would think that's how it should be.
My thinking was
And then as you
around-
switch, you go, maybe I should be doing this instead. This gets me back to where I think I always thought it should be.
I think your question was.
So I'd like to figure out a way to make that
Really good
work.
starting point.
I just have to figure that
That's the
out.
first
Right.
part of
Like,
the
how does this,
question.
and how does this actually
Then you
work?
become a guide.
But anyway.
Instead of-
Well, most of I learned, I said earlier, but just the importance of reflecting and kind of processing and finding the issues that I'm seeing in my classroom and how, it's always nice kind of having a sounding board too, to like, so, did you
Yeah.
see this also? And
I mean, I
that
think
type of
that's
thing.
Yeah, that dialogue,
Just very nice to
it
have.
goes both ways. The dialogue really helps
I totally am like, oh yeah.
formulate your thoughts.
And then you're like, no.
That reflective process. It's not just, oh, that went bad, but it was, I didn't know bad thing about it.
Right, so I think that was helpful.
Yes,
That's inspiring.
definitely.
Question where it
All right. Is there any shifts?
This is this question, this is my level 2 question, tier 3 question,
Where's
my,
that?
whatever. But it's gonna just kind
Results
of
do you anticipate?
questioning will
I
evolve.
didn't
don't
really
know.
answer that question.
Yeah, I didn't really answer it. Because
Well, I didn't know
that's
how
still
to
my
really-
question,
Okay,
I guess. We'll see how it goes,
yeah.
I guess.
Does Ted have any good ideas?
Somewhere along the
I
way.
don't know.
What's that?
Oh, I just realized you didn't have a partner, so. I don't know if you liked it that way.
I don't think
Oh, okay,
Now we're going back,
that's
so I'm kind of
Do the whole.
learning, reprogramming.
Yeah, it's always been my problem.
Personality, relationships, and there's no antitrust or judgment. And then the next thing that popped in my head today was, I'm an administrator in a building.
I think it's been an interesting
No matter
piece
what
of
people
being
say in
able
this
to
room,
kind
you
of
haven't been a building administrator. Some of you have. The ones that haven't.
deconstruct kind of this process.
So how do I work
And
with my
I've kind of
people
been in some
all the time?
interesting
I took like
reflections.
30 people.
I started Mountain View in high school,
First time ever.
and I kind of jumped into the
By
conversation.
the time I got back to that first
I've never
meeting,
been in
it was
instructional
way after
coaching. That's just not
Thanksgiving,
my gig.
whatever.
And actually, Randy asked me.
So I thought,
he had tried to start asking me conversations. He said, he goes, Ted's really
now it's all
working.
over.
And he asked me,
Stack here and stack here. These people really
This is what I
need
really
help.
need.
They've got.
And I thought about that.
They've
You
got
know,
over.
where did I get to
And so
this?
that's
Where did I get to
so that's kind of like
kind of a way of
the worst
thinking
most
about
appreciation
talking about it. And it really kind of came down to
Because I can't talk about
students
Yeah, it was.
that were very
Yeah.
gang involved,
Some of them were
very engaged students. And I got that process around collaborative problem solving. It's kind of the same structure of collaborative problem solving. It's an unsolved problem. It's not your problem, and it's not what you
You know, if you
see.
haven't gotten to that yet, how far are you going?
What a student's doing in the reality are really different worlds. So you can put all these structures around the students,
Play, just focus on the simplicity.
and you're not solving their problem while it's not in their head. And then I found I work with teachers, I have to talk to teachers too, because they're going to the emotional interaction with the kids. Because it's not you, the kids just told F off. It's the teacher that's
What were they, how were they engaged in the
same
lesson?
kind of
Okay,
thing.
well,
And-
so-and-so
but what
wasn't
was
engaged,
it?
so-and-so was this. Well,
What do you do in
you know,
collaborative problem solving
to help them
with students and adults? Well, this is
There you go.
it's a collaborative.
Yeah.
You
But
find
it's
a
not
problem.
right.
What is it? And then what was it that we do? It's really having people really behaviorally define
In the heavy this year, it's like,
what they've attached value to. And they don't, the first time they said, they look upon verbs. I'm a math person, I don't know, it's just read a verb and add, but you know what? And I realized it's that statement.
Looking down, what
And so,
are kids
but
doing
by
and
being able to give that tool, as Julie says,
What if
if I
they,
realize it's
not the teacher,
their value of
place they have.
more and more kind of processing that. So how do you keep on giving it as a structure that people can do as opposed to? And I also learned what you had said is it was good that I could spend some time looking at my stuff. When we had done this yesterday in Covington, and I kind of intervened in what she said yesterday, she goes, what I really would have liked is had a chance to look at my stuff. And I thought, well, and I had to go, because she did an incredible job. She got this really great place where her focus is going to be next.
like a business or.
And I thought, well, she got there. But she really felt the need. She would have felt the conversation would have been even better. She wouldn't have just kind of
They're not getting it.
started just talking because she hadn't really processed it yet. So, but she did say, as an administrator, you would have never done this right afterwards anyway.
Right, yeah.
There's never, because there's never, that doesn't, the schedule never allows that to happen, so that's almost a benefit to it. So that was a good feedback, that it helped you. She said just yesterday, I would have liked that. So that kind of piece is,
Change it.
makes sense.
When I first got.
Yeah, it does. I thought about it. So it's just really interesting to how that we can really change the conversations we have in this district from at all levels to ones in which will be productive and move us forward to educate all kids, as the ones that will be playing the same old game as like decades.
Very happy.
You remember when you got evaluated?
Oh, yeah.
I got evaluated. The principal never showed up in my class. An evaluation was written.
Everybody's just, they don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, well, it makes me think of the article, the Evaluator Coach article in that Education Leadership magazine. That really kind of hit me of where I was kind of at myself. I was like, evaluation is really about just the minimal. You know, like making sure they're just doing what they need to do. And the next step is what we're doing here is what we want is the teacher to get better.
And this is, the teacher I said to you yesterday, you gotta assure confidence. Once you assure confidence, and that's what evaluation is, essentially confidence. And that's meeting this requirement. And once we've done that, then it should all be about this. Because the next step, teaching is just the next step you're gonna figure out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not. Yeah, so I think that that's probably my biggest thing is that, and then how do you put this together in that package that all administrators can understand what we want and what we value and how that's going to look.
And it's a shift with the teacher too, getting used to. If you're not used, they might be thinking, well, this is a value to teach. I gotta be careful.
Right, and that's what that teacher said. She goes, I just thought you were dating.
We're gonna come back together as a whole group.
Interesting.
A lot of energy percolating with all of that. What we'd like to do is go ahead and share the the last piece about next steps and what that will accomplish, or what, you expect the change to happen. And we're gonna do that whole group, just do a go around and have each person share out. So we can get a sense of what would be people's next steps and what would be the impact of those next steps.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
One of my, I listened to Erica say that the processing time was important, and when I do an observation of a teacher, it's always a 2-hour, and I try to see the class before their planning period, so that I can, as I visit the school, I can do both. And I'm thinking, well, that's not a good model. So that's my next step, is to figure that out, because I totally hear what you're saying.
I think it's to listen for those key words that Erica, some of those key words Erica said, the kids struggled with, and then just go, well, why do you think they struggled? Or the kids did this well, why do you think they did well? Just a bunch of questions about the words that you say, and forget some of the wonderings that I have. It doesn't matter. It's all about you. You record me?
Yes, I'll record it.
I guess what? I like this one.
My learning is that, or my next steps are to think about what the relationship here is between the principal and the teacher is becoming much more clear to me. And now thinking about what are the implications for math coaches and how these kinds of conversations come into play with conversations where there is data in the room, or where we do, have some expertise to share or whatever. So I'm trying to just think about the difference now between this kind of conversation and the conversation coaches have with teachers, because I think this kind of conversation is a component of the coaches' conversation, but only a piece of that. So I'm curious about thinking more about that.
One of the things I would like to put into practice, I mentor new teachers, and just that questioning process, I think is very empowering, because they realize that they actually have the answers to their own questions. They don't have to look outside of themselves. They can ask and give feedback, but they don't necessarily have to get their problem solved.
So my next steps are kind of related to what Heidi was talking about, and I was thinking about the differences between conversations that I have with teachers that I'm coaching and these kinds of conversations. And sometimes conversations are like this very much, but sometimes they are a place where teachers just say, I don't really, I'm not really sure, what might that look like? And so then being able to kind of develop some pictures or some visions or some plans that are more specific.
I think for me, just practice, continue to practice the questioning, because the questions lead to trust, and then people are more brave and they take more risk in their teaching. And that's not always easy. When you're sitting across from an evaluator, you think you're being judged. So how do I get away from that feeling and constantly working on building trust?
One thing I was thinking about is when I observe a classroom, I'm typing up my notes as I do it. I send the notes right away, and then I schedule a post-conference. And I'm realizing sending the notes, they're going to then realize it and make value judgments based on what I put in my notes. And so that think time for the teacher, and then also providing my notes, we legally have to give our notes, don't we?
If they request them.
Okay. So I was thinking about how those notes are then really just for me. They're not, I don't necessarily need the teacher to see them unless, they request them, I guess. So that I'm not skewing the conversation before I've even started it.
I feel like I said all my next steps in the interview. But, I think it's just remembering the importance of reflecting and having those conversations, whether it's with an administrator or a colleague. Because you could have these similar conversations with another teacher to kind of help them work through their day or your own day. So I think it's good strategies for me to see, to bring back to just my colleagues.
I think kind of both what Randy and Julie said is what I've been thinking about, is that idea of just practicing this, number one. Just doing it a little bit more. And then also just this idea of thinking a little bit more about the process to make it so that it's not just about evaluation, it's helping me kind of wrap my head around what evaluation really is. And then once we have that, how do we then get the teacher to move forward? And it's a lot of that trust and teacher taking risk and opening themselves up and then understanding that you are going to help them. And so how you do that, I think this is helping me see more, get a better picture of how to do that.
I think that I'm trying to, these are kinds of conversations that kind of have happened kind of through trial and error, and I've been an administrator for a long time. And what is it about these conversations that move thinking forward, and why do they do that? And then how do you kind of formulate that to have it as a better structure for people? Because this has kind of happened almost kind of organically as we've evolved through this process. The second piece is, it taps onto what Matt said, is that at some point principals are going to go, okay, I get this, but how does this fit all together in the supervision and evaluation process that we all must do? And then how's that put together? How's that put together with the logistics of notes, with the logistics of, at the end of the day, you're gonna have to write down some of the things that you did evaluate, because there's gonna be a document that will be an evaluation. How is that connected to this conversation? If this is in a post-observation conference, there's gonna be a components that you're gonna have a write-up on. So what does that look like, and how is that put together? I think from a procedural standpoint, as we go down this path, is how do we put those pieces together? It's a wonder. I got to figure that out. And like I said, I haven't spent a whole lot of time in teacher evaluation in Evergreen because I don't do teacher evaluations.
I was going to ask you about that, because that was a wrinkle when we read the article. You can stop recording now. It's funny, when I read the article, we used to look at what students were doing. That was the main focus when we talked, and I think that's really good. So I took the form and I just put, what's the student doing, what are the teachers doing, and what's the task? And I just redesigned my observation sheet. So I go in, I take really descriptive notes of what's going on, but I'm talking to the teacher and I'm trying to stay away from that value judgment. When I read a statement that Johnny is texting to his girlfriend or somebody, or these certain things that we're really seeing do, it throws a judgment by just what they're doing. If I'm a teacher and someone's reading what kids are doing, this girl's over here sleeping, drool is starting to fall out of her mouth. So I got to be really careful with how I get that relationship piece, but how I write it, because I don't want to draw a surprise when I write the evaluation. For example, on such and such a day when we're descriptive. So that's kind of got me in a little bit of a...
Well, and I think that the piece that I think has been important as we've gone through this is, what is the teacher asking you to look at? Mm-hmm. And, in any classroom, at any moment in time, we can all write down stuff that...
Right.
Let's be honest. We all do there. We all die.
It's a bad thing. Yeah.
So what we've chosen to write down has impact. So if a teacher's saying this is why this is so important to the lens, is what you're looking is around what the teacher's practice and problem is. It's very different than if I have a brand new teacher or a teacher that I've already defined some areas that there's deficiencies, then my focus is really based on that area of deficiency. It has to be data, it has to be really for a purpose of the next step. I have always had a hard time with, I write verbatim notes, I write all of what I see. All what I see is very, what I choose to write down is not comprehensive. And teachers will say that to you all the time if you've ever done that. They say, well, you didn't see this, and you didn't see this, and you didn't see that. There's always a hole in there. So it's very carefully to what you've written down is either to the concept of what the teacher says their problem of practice is, or if you have one that you've directed the teacher because you see deficiencies, then it's going to be around that. If it's this other stuff, that wide lens is very problematic, because that wide lens creates you've made choices to write that piece down. We could have collected a whole bunch of different data in that classroom, and somebody else could have collected a whole bunch of different data in all of our classrooms that we taught, if they sat there. So we have to have that kind of understanding. I used to say to teachers, you want to see my notes, go ahead. And they go, well, they don't mean much. I go, they're just my thinking. They're my wondering at that particular point in time. It's not really all comprehensive. It's what I jot down to say, oh, I'm wondering, on a clear focus. And I think that's the thing, because if we want a teacher to move their very next step of learning, their very next step of getting better at this very complex practice, we have to have the information that allows that.
Okay.
If we don't, if it's all over the board, they go, what do I do with this? And a teacher, if they looked at all your stuff and looked at that stuff, they're gonna go, God, that kid. They're gonna focus right on that, what they perceive to be a negative statement. And then you can't put that genie back in the bottle. No matter what you do at that point in time,
Because the trust is lost.
they're gonna think this is it. Because you have to turn around and write an evaluation. And the thinking is, well, is it gonna be that my kids were off task and kids in my classroom were drooling and, it's inherently what we're all gonna do. So I think this is our next steps. Your questions you're asking are right. What do we do? Here's a process. Whatever its messiness, and we all have to jump through the hoops, how do we do it if we're gonna have authentic conversations?
I want to end on one note, Erica, that the boy with the sweatshirt, when he walked in, the way you handled that, you just said, get some tape and put it on. I wish other teachers could see that. No conflict. He said, at the end of the day, he said, I've missed this class twice, but I skipped my other class since I can't pass in that class. This is the class I can make it in. And then later, in our example, he said, I'm smart. And I kind of think back to where he was when you first got him and where he is now. That's pretty good data, I think.
Well, and that's the thing that's so important is that the things that she chose to ignore so learning could continue.
Right.
I could have written down as kids did this, kids did that, but the choice to ignore it is a conscious choice. What mattered and what didn't matter is really important to be able to acknowledge. And so, because that's to say, is if you write everything down, we all look bad. I mean,
Exactly. That's kind of like, yeah.
But we knew it happened, and we chose that was, if I fight that battle,
Right.
learning's not gonna happen.
Well, and we have history, so.
So, Randy, when you use the word trust, I guess what I was thinking is it's more about their belief, so it's more about the belief of what is it you're looking for? Are you looking to get me, or are you looking to help me?
Right.
I guess you can still trust somebody, but you're,
Well, there used to be a phrase in our district where you're in a boat and you're throwing rope out, and you get to a certain point where there's like 400 yards of rope. And that's where I was saying the conversation's different. And when you have someone that's new, we have to make $1 million decision for our district, and John's saying high standards, and where's the continuum? This person's a brand new teacher, and we're supporting this person to survive versus a person that's a veteran that's good at what they do. And
I'm not a veteran.
Well, you're getting there.
It's my third year.
I hired you.
So everybody knows.
Just go with it, you're better.
So, it's a different conversation. So that's when I say, when the trust comes in, you get to a certain point where, like Ted was saying, that I have to take a direction because I have deadlines coming at me in January and February, and I have to make a decision. And that's the hard part.
Well, this is the world that we all have to figure out. If we believe these conversations are part of the process, there's delineations between these. That probationary teachers that have defined deficiencies, and then teachers that have met that competency. Because I call it supervision and evaluation. We all have these separate hats. The conversation is really different with that first year teacher, because you're going to say, okay, these pieces. Those pieces can be coached outside of us, but at the end of the day, John's right, is if we look at it, we have to make an evaluative decision about whether this is going to be a person that fits for our district and will be a long-term success in our district. And it's a projection.
right.
Not unlike what your
That's-
husband
that's
does.
right,
It says,
exactly.
okay, is this person going to be this, because you're investing an X amount of money. It's what kind of, I expect our principals to say is after those first 3 years. But this isn't what this conversation's
No,
about.
no,
We're not
uh-uh.
talking about that.
Yeah.
But principals, we're all gonna have to go, well, how do we do the difference, Ted? And what is that? And that is the next step for us.
Well, and I think it gets, for the coaches, we have always been in this, or often put into a place that we're not sure how to navigate, because sometimes we've been asked to help a teacher who really is needing probably somebody who has more authority. I don't know. It's just, it's kind of these really gray areas. So this actually has been very helpful for me to think
Well,
about those different.
That was
ways.
always, and Heidi, I've had kind of a lot of spirited conversations around this, is that there is a difference. And if we don't define the difference, the muddiness for coaches will always exist. When me, as a principal, my coach and I had a very clear defined difference. And she would do that work, and sometimes work with teachers that had deficiencies, but our lines of separation were very clear.
Yeah.
And we actually had this really interesting conversation in Covington where Carrie and I and the teacher kind of actually had a fishbowl conversation about why they were different and how they were different, and how what I did and what she would do following, and how the teacher would interact with her based on this conversation, how it all worked. And then so she go, oh, I get how this is all these pieces, because the teacher would come as, okay, here's what I want to try, and they could disaggregate the data and dump it all out and mess with it. And I say, if I do it, it totally shuts the conversation down. But if I've defined a deficiency, the teacher can very clearly know the deficiency and what they need to ask the coach to do. Never will me and the coach have that conversation. Never, ever will me and the coach have a conversation. Unless the teacher says, I'd like to meet with the principal and the coach and say, you tell her and me, and then I would. But see, I would say that my conversation ends with you, because there's this piece over here. And I always had it with all teachers. I would never say what our internal conversation was with any teacher. Never. Because at some point in time, we have to write an evaluation. And if I enter into it, that trust will break down.
I hope we have more conversations around the cycle too. Like, I know in Oregon, it's every other year, which would be bizarre. You wouldn't see a teacher for, every other year. In our district, in our high schools, we have about 26 to 30 teachers per administrator. So when you look at your time and your efficiency of who you spend your time with and how you look at that, I think we could be more effective in the future on that.
And it's not, Oregon has multitudes of different ways. When I was in Portland, I had to evaluate a teacher every single year how to do a clinical supervision.
Okay.
In Tigard, I would at times never have to evaluate a teacher. So it varied too.
Really?
But I think what we do for a PGO, I think that this conversation would be great in a PGO. Like, you've defined your problem, you go and do some observations, you set it up, and then you have this conversation,
Nice.
and off you go.
Right.
I think that would be a way in which you don't have to do the whole clinical supervision model, but you could still incorporate the PGO in a PGO that, hey, I know you're working on this. Come in, let me check it out.
I'd like to endorse that idea, because I think that we have a lot of teachers who are at 80%,
Yeah.
and they're kind of ignored because they're
Right,
okay.
right,
But they're not
exactly.
as good as they could be if they had support. And because of lack of resources and time, they often,
So, and
I don't wanna do the- I don't do the cry
admit
whine thing.
my ignorance in the whole process. It's a big old book, and I have not looked at it.
I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind giving us some feedback about the process. So plus delta, so something positive and something you would recommend change if you have any recommendations. So a plus delta, something that worked, and a recommendation for change.
Following students to the attendance office: Andrea Gregory, Michael Chavez, Austin Paiwang. Andrea Gregory, Michael Chavez, Austin Paiwang to the attendance office.
I like how it's the middle of third period and they just made that announcement.
He's very good.
They never make announcements during class period. Yeah, I was kind of like, are we in lockdown? It's the only time they interrupt classes. Mm-mm. Yeah, there's an assembly schedule. We have like 4 minutes left in third period and then it'd be lunch. So that's why I was surprised they made an announcement because
Andrea Gregerson.
I think they think
the
it's
attendance
passing
office.
time.
Andrea Gregerson.
Well, there's
to
kids
the
on
attendance office.
Oh, and the bells didn't ring. Weird.
I see that.
Quite a while.
Oh, just out there.
That's why I thought it was lunch, because they were sort of like milling around, talking to each other.
I like that around.
And if you leave your reflection sheet, I will send those back to the podium. Be sure your name's on it so I can get it back to the right
Yeah,
person.
the reflection sheets, if Heidi would like to have these.
So that we can plan for the next.
Guide the work. And then you can just leave your sticky notes on the table. And your yellow cards.
And our yellow cards. We don't need to take this with
No,
us.
thank you so much, you guys.
At the P12, there will probably be some conversation about how this work is playing out, so you might want to be thinking about what you've done as a result of this work at the next P12. Tuesday.
Also looking at this.
Make sure you show your lunch pass on the way out.
We will. And tell Matt he should take his union card thing down. I'm like,
Look at this back.
Oh, no. Rough place. It is a rough place. Woo!
You guys want the math problem?
You can keep it. You can take it back if you
Perfect.
like.
Still don't know how.
You can go and.
You can frame it on your wall.
Skills, math skills.
I'll have to look at it.
Oh, sorry.
He didn't write almost, he wrote almost nothing.
He's got an answer.
He looked
Oh,
right
yeah,
at
but
it
he-
and it goes,
I
it's
don't know.
6/4.
Was it slow?
It's
I
the one
wasn't
you
here
had
for the
two
whole
coordinate
process,
points.
so I don't know any
You were
changes.
define the slope.
well, it's interesting to think
He looked
about
right at it and goes
conversations
6/4.
like I've learned.
And I go,
Because, I mean, we
what?
have
And then he
pages
has,
of
he
what we
wrote
saw.
down, he started
Oh my
to
gosh.
do it, he wrote down,
Is that what you
4
were saying?
plus
Actually,
question
it's like,
mark
there's
equals
that
8.
Say and what you need to
So
learn.
that was 4. They go,
We're learning a lot.
Yeah.
Evaluations.
what
It's
are
nice.
you
Good.
That kid, if you want to
I
engage
asked
them, because
Conrad
he's so
about his
funny.
card.
James?
Yeah.
Yeah.
God. It's hard to be quiet, he keeps
Where
looking
he
at
had
us.
done 15 or
Oh,
5
yeah, yeah.
It's party on.
What he ended up doing was saying,
He goes, you know,
5 pages takes,
Oh, I was watching that.
or
That was
5
funny.
pages, and I need
I almost-
65 pages, so I need 13 groups of 5 pages.
I almost brought that up.
And each of those 5 pages took 45 seconds.
Oh, yes, James.
So,
I think he just more wants to, he tries to get a rise out of people and he realized like with me it's not gonna happen, so he like finds other
then you just
people.
crack it off.
But I know him in a different, because he's also one of our T-Wolf Academy students, so one of our alternative schools, and I did that in the fall. So it was like I had that relationship with him as well as in the classroom. So it's kind of nice to see.
Want to explain to
different
you how I
side.
did this?
I
They're so
know
much
that
fun.
These are magnets, so.
They are. I think
So then you're now over
got magnetized
at IQ,
to
right?
my-
Oh, how's that going? Yeah. I know, I thought of you, I'm like, oh goodness.
It's good. It's just a whole nother, different view of learning.
The
teaching. My husband's an online teacher, so I kind of
Here's my question. He's already failed this one. He's already
but
taken
it's
integrated
different. I miss the
3. He said today he only failed it once. That's what he
you-
told me. He first
Are
said
you
twice
at
and then he turned to
IQ or
1.
are you at home?
Why isn't that?
for now.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
not that, why isn't he just in a credit recovery course and get that dang thing out of the box?
Gotcha.
Because we
That
have
better be the benefit.
Yeah, that'd be nice. You'd be home with your kids.
Yeah, I know. It's good. It's a new learning
I think he just
experience.
took it. I overheard it too. He took it. They moved him from integrated 1 to integrated 3.
Oh, I thought he passed.
No, I don't think he
No,
passed.
it's not. Be more integrated, so I'm going to kind of be on
So he hasn't passed either integrated 2 or integrated 3?
front end of it.
So why would,
right,
what would be
catch
the
up.
argument
So,
for keeping him at 1 and not just integrated 2?
Yeah, did it just happen overnight or was it?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Because
You know, 'cause
starting
Because he'll say his entry
hard.
into the class has all that.
And so it's,
Backdrop.
but I still have such a good
He's
support system.
a senior.
Yeah.
He's a senior in there, and
Yeah.
it's like,
So I'm not getting.
You can still go there and
you know, you
visit.
just wonder.
Yeah, we're like
No,
Greg. Greg and
because
Charles.
it-
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are.
No, because
good at what they do. They have a lot of knowledge.
We had different tasks, so we would push kids to
got my job at
that
Union.
level, in most cases.
They're very strong, very helpful.
And
learned a lot.
there's some
There's
concern that they're not ready or whatever, but then it was,
But happens,
That's
if
good,
they
I'm
didn't
glad.
pass the class, they didn't pass the state test. We like to make
Have you kept in
Yeah.
touch with Lake Ridge people or not really?
yes.
But if
Sharon retires this year.
okay.
They offer big
The
bonuses.
teachers are gonna hang on to the standards.
Really?
They still need to know. When they've
Interesting.
mastered
Quite a
it,
few
they'll
people
revert back to
retired.
it.
So it's a new staff in there.
Yeah. I keep in touch more with the people I work with at Beluga.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
So it's such a different atmosphere. Like I knew them as people, but even then,
I'm not sure how they were
Sharon
about
I don't know that that's
collaborated. People,
the
you know,
idea. I
it's,
know the idea
I think
initially was,
if I went back to
this was
teaching
back
now,
when history
I would
was
do
at
it so
10
differently. And
Really?
so, you know, you
So
think
the
about
idea
it.
was,
Like,
why
I
have a
learned
kid
a lot
repeat
on
one
those
and
meetings
never get
of
exposed
what
to grade
everybody
two and then be tested on it?
I'm really liking
Then we
this
keep,
district.
now we're in this cycle now where
If they
we,
pass in grade two, they've met their,
correct.
Coaches, coaches.
if they pass
It's pretty
it,
cool.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. I'm liking it. I'm learning a ton, so.
do they have to pass?
And that's funny, you're a veteran.
I know, I'm like, 3 years. Barely. I'm technically not even off of probation.
And so I,
Oh, really? Is it 3 years? I thought it was
But it,
Oh, maybe
the
it
question
is.
I have is, you
Oh,
need
what
one
they-
to,
they-
all right.
what I think what they were gonna do, maybe I'm wrong.
It's just like,
They were gonna,
No.
they were finding out, if they moved to the standards phase, they find out which standards they had mastered
that, and that's
and they
now.
only,
And that makes a bunch of sense.
And that's what's going on right
They don't have
now.
that data, they just push these
Yes.
people forward without that data.
yeah.
And
you-
it's a curiosity, once it's standard based, it totally makes sense.
Yes, and that's where we're trying to head. Because what we're seeing now is the kind of a cumulative effect of the previous, so we're in this transitional stage. So we're dealing with those problems right now. But I think in the future,
we knew each
it's got a lot of potential to be what you're saying, make it
Yeah, well, in the future, hopefully it's totally standard based and it's all very smooth.
so we just gotta figure out how to grade it.
And, well, that's just the one question.
But I would think that James